Well, hello, we're here. Timing is everything. All right, well. Oh,
Could have been a better song.
that's right. Well, welcome, guinea pigs. Uh-oh is right. Uh-oh is right. So I'm going to continue to share information that I gleaned from trip to Israel and kind of do everything I can to help make the Bible come to life just a little bit more for you as it did for me and continues to do. So with that, we'll get started. And today we're going to use fish and the eyes of Mary Magdalene to help us with our vision of the Bible today. And so, I don't know if this is going to be loud enough. Yeah. So we will be going to Magdala. And Magdala is a very unique city, a first century city during the time of Jesus on the western coast of the Sea of Galilee. So, but we're going to start today in Mark. In Mark 1, 38 through 39, this is just after Jesus had healed Peter's mother in Capernaum. And Jesus replied to his disciples, "Let us go somewhere else, to the nearby villages, so I can preach there also. That is why I have come." So he traveled throughout Galilee, preaching in their synagogues and driving out demons. Mark 6 tells us, "How many loaves do you have?" Jesus asked them. "Go and see." When they found out, they said 5 and 2 fish. Matthew 15 tells us, "How many loaves do you have?" Jesus asked. 7, they replied, "and a few small fish." The number of those who ate was 4,000 men, besides women and children. After Jesus had sent the crowd away, he got into the boat and went to the vicinity of Magadan, which is Magdala, is what we know as Magdala today. Now, this is a map. You see Capernaum up there, and you see Magdala. And you see this big Sea of Galilee, which is more like to us a big lake. So it's not that far for Jesus to travel amongst the synagogues around the Sea of Galilee. And it's only about a 3-hour walk from Capernaum to Magdala. And in between Capernaum and Magdala is the mountain where the Beatitudes was given. So all of that is just right there in that vicinity. So we go to Luke, and in chapter 8, it says, "After this, Jesus traveled about from one town and village to another, proclaiming the good news of the kingdom of God. The 12 were with him, and also some women who had been cured of evil spirits and diseases. Mary, called Magdalene, from whom 7 demons had come out. Joanna, the wife of Chuza, the manager of Herod's household, and Susanna, and many others. These women were helping to support them out of their own means." Now, I want you to keep in mind, it says they were supporting them, which would have been Jesus and the disciples. They were financially supporting them. And when you go to the Sea of Galilee, especially back then, this was not an area for the 1%ers. These were blue-collar fishermen, boat builders, if you were a Sadducee, a Pharisee, if you were in the upper class, you lived nowhere around the Sea of Galilee. That was not your area. Now, that doesn't mean to say that there were not some people that had wealth, because they worked their tails off to get it. And very well could be that many of them didn't know how to read or write. We heard that Mary Magdalene, she was probably financially well off because she lived in Magdala. And Magdala, at that time, was the city, if you were going to live in a city around Galilee, a place to live. It might have been a population of somewhere between 5,000 and 10,000 people, and very prosperous for that area around the Sea of Galilee. So these women did have the means. Matter of fact, one of them was the wife of the person who took care of King Herod's estates. So you know he was probably paid very well. So they did have the means to take care of the disciples and Jesus financially, and they did so. So Matthew 27 tells us this. Many women were there watching from a distance. They had followed Jesus from Galilee to care for his needs. Among them were Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James, and Joseph, and the mother of Zebedee's sons. Now we've transitioned now from Galilee to Jerusalem. They have followed Jesus to Jerusalem, and they've witnessed Jesus coming in to the city of Jerusalem through the palm leaves and all of the hurrah and celebration that Jesus was receiving. They saw that. And with a loud cry, Jesus breathed his last. Some women were watching from a distance. Among them were Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James, the younger, and of Joseph, and Salome. In Galilee, these women had followed him and cared for his needs. Many other women who had come up with him to Jerusalem were also there. So Joseph bought some linen cloth, took down the body, wrapped it in the linen, and placed it in the tomb cut out of the rock. Then he rolled a stone against the entrance of the tomb. Mary Magdalene and Mary, the mother of Joseph, saw where he was laid. When the Sabbath was over, Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James, and Salome bought spices so they might go to anoint Jesus' body. Very early on, the first day of the week, just after sunrise, they were on their way to the tomb, and they asked each other, "Who will roll away the stone from the entrance of the tomb?" But when they looked up, they saw that the stone, which was very large, had been rolled away. As they entered the tomb, they saw a young man dressed in a white robe sitting on the right side, and they were alarmed. Now, I wanted to give you a picture of what these tombs look like, because I really never had a good concept of what a high-class tomb would be available to Jesus. And this was Joseph of Arimathea, who was very wealthy, and he was one of the 1%ers, and he would have had one of these caves dug out. And it took a great deal of preparation to prepare a tomb like this. They are carved out into the rock, and they have several different compartments. And this kind of gives you an idea of what they would lay the body on. An area, it's a special room that would just lay the body, and that body would lay there for a year. And after that year, they would roll the stone back, and the body would decompose, and all that would be left would be bones. And then they would take those bones, put them in usually a carved out chest of stone, and put those bones in the stone chest called an ossuary, and then they would have another area where it would be just a small place that would be carved off into the back of that tomb. that they would slide that ossuary in. And there would be several of those for different family members. So they would continue to use the area to lay the bodies down. And some of these that were even fancier had one on each side entrance door. So I wanted to give you an example. I took this picture because we went to a place that has not had any archaeological digs in it at this point, but he took us there because he wanted to show us a first century tomb. This tomb, they have diagnosed that it was constructed sometime between 20 AD and 60 AD, which would have been at the same time that Jesus' tomb was prepared. But it's very interesting as you see this, and some of it has deteriorated over the years because it has not been restored in any way. This is the way it's been throughout the 2,000 years. But normally the cave would have come down a little bit further down and would be a kind of a solid entrance there. But you can see they put up a brick entrance into the cave after they dig it out. And then the walls, they have two walls with a huge be carved out. So you have this big rock, and then all of a sudden you make it into this round hamburger-looking patty, and you roll it in front of the tomb entrance. And then if you look back there in the back, you see a little opening, and in that opening there would be an area where the little cutouts were for the ossuaries, and I think there were 8 in that area there. But all of this was carved out. I don't know if you can see right up in here. I mean, there's even designs carved out into the cave. So this took a lot of time, a lot of effort to prepare these. So for Joseph of Arimathea to do this was a great sacrifice for him. He had no idea. I mean, this had to be something that he had started 2 or 3 years prior to allowing Jesus to use this tomb. Now Mary stood outside the tomb crying. As she bent over to look into the tomb. She saw 2 angels in white seated where Jesus' body had been, one at the head and one at the other at the foot. This is a very important verse and very important information that John gives us about what Mary saw in the tomb when she looked. If you remember that picture I showed you, you could see where Jesus' body would have been, but instead of that, what was there was an angel at where his feet would have been and where his head would have been. And it's very important because that relates to Exodus 25, where it says, "And make 2 cherubim out of hammered gold at the ends of the cover. Make 1 cherub on one end and the second cherub on the other. The cherubim are to face each other, looking toward the cover. There, above the cover, between the 2 cherubim that are over the ark of the covenant, I will meet with you and give you all my commands for the Israelites." So that was the Ark of the Covenant, 2 angels at both ends. Created the seat where God would sit and meet with Moses and Aaron during the wilderness. And so the Ark of the Covenant, that had the 10 Commandments underneath of it. And when Mary Magdalene looked into that tomb and she saw the angels at each end, with what in between? Nothing. Nothing. The law had ended. The law had been fulfilled. The law had risen. The Word had risen. So a very important verse that John tells us, because there were the 2 cherubs and there was no law anymore. "Don't be alarmed," he said. "You are looking for Jesus the Nazarene, who was crucified. He has risen. He is not here. See the place where they laid him, but go tell his disciples and Peter, He is going ahead of you into Galilee. There you will see him told you." Trembling and bewildered, the women went out and fled from the tomb. They said nothing to anyone because they were afraid. When Jesus rose early on the first day of the week, he appeared first to Mary Magdalene, out of whom he had driven 7 demons. Wow. What a thrill that would have been. She went and told those who had been with him and who were mourning and weeping. When they heard that Jesus was alive and that she had seen him, they did not believe it. Who would believe a woman who just months prior had demons all in her? Could she even be trustworthy? Yeah, it'd be kind of hard to believe somebody like that, to say, "Hey, he's no longer dead. He is risen." I could see them going, "Man, I think the demons are back." I'm not sure she's all there anymore. But they didn't believe her. And he had to prove it to them. You know, here you could picture Mary Magdalene talking to Peter, trying to convince him, and yet he's saying, "Lady, he died on a cross. We saw it. There's no way." Now, Magdala is a unique site in the Holy Land. Here one can find a first century synagogue, the only one in the Galilee area that has been uncovered. Now, there's some synagogues that have been uncovered, but they were not century built. They may have been built prior to Jesus' birth in maybe 200 to 300 years or 100 years before his birth. But this particular synagogue was built sometime between Jesus' birth and around 20 AD. So this was a brand new synagogue. This was state of the art at the time. And it's one of only 7 first century synagogues that have been excavated throughout the world. It is a complete first century city and remains as one of the once a prosperous fish processing and shipbuilding industry. That's what their industry was there. Complete with first century shops, marketplace, there were residential areas that had a wharf. This is the city where Jesus himself most likely visited and taught in this synagogue. And when you think of the biblical Galilee, it is easy to picture those images in our minds of fishermen in their boats, Jewish seaside cities, Roman soldiers, and crowds gathered around to hear the words of a humble rabbi from nearby Nazareth. But not the 1%ers. The ranking Pharisees and Sadducees, they lived in the hilltops in the more extravagant cities. The cities along the coast were the blue-collar workers. Now, Jesus spent the majority of his ministry in the Galilee area, in the region. It is in Galilee that Jesus established his home base, called his disciples, performed many of the great miracles that we read about in Scripture. Magdala was also the home and main headquarters for the Jewish leader Yosef ben Mattaniah. You've heard of him, right? Yosef ben Mattaniah? Well, you might better know him as the Roman historian Flavius Josephus. He lived in Magdala, and he was the governor of the Galilee area when the Romans selected him to be the governor of the area. So he was a very prominent and wrote a tremendous amount about the history, especially during the time of the destruction of the temple. Now, according to his historical account, Magdala became a gathering place for rebels who had defied the Romans. These people were not citizens of the city, but people who came from elsewhere around the region around 67 AD when the Israelites and the Jewish people were revolting against Rome. So at that time, Josephus tells us that that city may have been like 25, 30,000 people in this general area. So in 67 CE, AD, Rome forces commanded by Vespasian reached Magdala and put siege to the city. After its fall, many of the rebels fled by boat and were killed during the battle in the Sea of Galilee. The Romans killed all the remaining inhabitants. Although there have been small settlements in the area over the centuries, Magdala was never reestablished. Magdala became a forgotten city, hidden between the layers of soil deposits by rainwater, floods, over a 2,000-year period. Now, this picture was taken in 1920, and this is what the Sea of Galilee and the Magdala area would have looked like. And you might look at that and say, well, that's some ruins there. But that was actually not ruins. That was a German settlement, and that was their community. These are all fairly new structures. There was nothing there but land that could be seen. So they built this area up just enough to kind of have a small existence, maybe 40 or 50 people that were living there at the time. But in the 1960s, from an early age, a Catholic father by the name of Juan Solana felt drawn to the Christian witness of Mary Magdalene. Father Juan's mother had a significant life event that endeared Mary Magdalene to her. So Father Juan felt the leading of Christ to build a retreat center in the area of Galilee. From the very beginning, he envisioned a place where pilgrims could enjoy comfortable accommodations in a spiritual atmosphere on the shores of the Sea of Galilee. Upon his arrival in Galilee, nothing in Migdal, which is what they called it up through, and still call it that today. There's a little town that's kind of outside the ruins, and they call that Migdal. The traditional area thought to be the location of Magdala. It was then that he felt inspired to purchase the land in the area to build a place for pilgrims to experience Jesus' ministry. So, now he did this, you can see that there's a lot of things that happened, and really not much happened throughout the decades up until 2004. And this is when Father Juan decided that, hey, I'm going to start buying some of this land, and I'm just going to build a hotel, a place where people can come and stay. So he first visited the site in 2005, and then in March 2009, they actually... Now, to start construction, you can't just go over there and start building. First of all, you have to go to the Israeli Antiquities Authority for them to come and test the site and make sure there's no archaeological discoveries that are there. And so they have a 5-month period to see what they can find before any construction can actually begin. So on September 1st, now this is 2009, keep in mind there's nothing there but land. A few houses. Matter of fact, in 1960 or 70, something like that, some people came in and built some little cabins for they called it the Hawaiian Resort for Galilee. And so it was 5 or 6 little cabins that you could go and rent. So really there was nothing there of any kind of substance. During the archaeological survey on September 1st, 2009, they discovered a synagogue. And this is kind of what it looked like in 2009. You can see the construction area right in here. This was actually a Roman city that was built sometime around 80 AD and was excavated in the 70s. But nothing else had really been excavated. And you can see this is the area of the synagogue, and then that area, that green pasture area, is where they did some and have been doing some archaeological digs up through this date. They are still uncovering things in Magdala. So, to date, they have about what they consider about 10% of the remains of the city uncovered. Only 10%. And this is a picture of the actual synagogue. And this was taken in about 2011, so they had just started this excavation process and were really doing things. But you could see the synagogue. These are the seats that are around the synagogue. People could also stand around the outside of it. And this is what it looks like today. And I wanted to show you this aerial view because it gives you a good idea. And I wanted to show you this is where that star is where the synagogue is under this covering. So it is all protected. But that covering is about the size of this church complex. So it's pretty good size. And so underneath of that is the synagogue. And then you can see there's some other archaeological digs that they've done around the synagogue that show that there's shops and stores and things that were all around that area. There's another area that they've excavated and shows houses and food preparation areas. There's an actual street that runs through there, and then there's another area that they've started archaeological digging, and another area there. And
was the synagogue originally covered, or that's just a recent addition?
That's what?
The covering of the synagogue. Is that the way it was, or
They built a covering over it so that when tourists come, they can see it basically out of the sun, because it does get hot. So it's just a covering, just almost like a pavilion is really what it is. It's just a pavilion that covers that area. And what's that?
modern day addition.
Right, yes. So it's just a covering so that people can come in and be out of the elements and really enjoy the synagogue and that area. So you can see they've started a lot of digging in a lot of different places, and they have started a kind of a hotel, motel type thing, complex around it as well, that this Father Juan had envisioned so that people could come and stay there and enjoy that. It's not finished as of yet, but they're still working on that. But I want you to think about it for a moment. Just 10 years ago, none of this was even thought of. No concept at all. That's how God is continuing and really giving us information about the life that Jesus would have had in that time period. So,
because now people are requiring more proof of
more evidence, please.
that God is valid and that what His Word says is
And
actually happening.
right, it corroborates exactly what's in that Bible. They're finding more and more things every day that are in God's Word. So I wanted to show you this picture because I thought it was quite unique. This is a stone. It is called the Bet Madras stone, where a scroll would have been laid out across the top to be read. And you can see the notches on the side that would have held the wooden dowels to hold the scroll in place. So they would have read the scrolls on that stone. Jesus could have been one of the ones that read the scroll on that stone. Here's an area that I thought was interesting because it is a fresco, and this would have been the entire building. They would have plastered over the rocks that they had stacked up, and it would all have been smooth, and you would have had these beautiful paintings and frescoes that would have adorned the interior of the synagogue. The outside of the synagogue would have been a white plaster, so it would have been a beautiful building and a very modern building for that time. Around the synagogue, you saw where the seats were, and then you saw that back part around the back is mosaic tile that would have been all the way around, and some of that mosaic tile still exists today. But it's just interesting the time and effort that it took to lay these mosaic tiles. And then I wanted to show you this picture because just outside the synagogue area, you would find the marketplace where shops and stores would be. And this specific picture is the fish prep area where fish would have been pickled, smoked, or salted for preparation. You know, when forward-thinking families of young boys could have come here and purchased a few fish before traveling an hour away to sit and listen on a hillside, and then have his fish taken away by one or two 12 men looking to try to feed 5,000 people. But he very would have likely got his fish from this area. See, this area prepared the fish that were caught in the Sea of Galilee, and from this area they would smoke or salt or pickle the fish, and then they would be shipped all throughout Israel and all throughout Syria and all over that Mediterranean area. So that's why this was a very prosperous city, a very busy city, because they fed a lot of that area with the fish that they prepared. And this, if you saw that little short video, you saw something there that I hope piqued your interest. It is called the Magdala Stone, and it is a very unique area, a very unique stone. In the rear of the floor of the synagogue is this stone. This stone is the Magdala Stone. It is one of a kind. When the Israelis Antiquities Authority came to start their excavation, which is required by luck or by God's providence, they began their excavation precisely over this stone. And it was this, and this was the first item that was exposed, and then realized and found that it was in the middle of this synagogue. Now, this is not the actual stone that I took a picture of. This is a replica, but they put it back exactly the way it was found. And then here you see the actual true stone that's on display there underneath that complex. You can go in and actually see that stone. And they believe that this is the most interesting and precious archaeological find in the last 50 years in Israel for several reasons. This is what it looked like when they first got it uncovered. They don't know exactly what this stone was used for or why it was carved, but here's what they do know. Before it was cleaned and they began to look at it, and based on some of the descriptions that were in the Jewish Talmud, it has pictures carved in it that represent the temple, Herod's temple, back in Jerusalem. So they suspect that whoever did this, whether it was one person or several people, they had to have seen the temple in Jerusalem. And to kind of give you an idea, this on the very front side is the oldest carved image of the Second Temple's 7-branch menorah that's ever been found. When initially uncovered, the stone was positioned in such a way that standing facing the menorah would cause a person to be facing south to the Temple of Jerusalem. And then on the sides of it, you can see the amphora jars that would have held water or oil for the temple. On the sides, the long negated sides of the stone depicts the sides of the building with pillared archways with three-dimensional design to create the illusion of peering inside the temple. The top of the stone shows the showbread tables, which were inside the Holy of Holies, the holy area, with the unleavened bread on top of it. There were 2 palmate columns representing the structure that would have been around the Holy of Holies. And then there was the 12-petal rosette that most likely represents the 12 tribes of Israel and would represent the veil of the Holy of Holies. The back of the stone is very unique. The back of the stone would be the deepest part of the temple, within the Holy of Holies, where there's a pair of images, wheels and fire. It is called the Shekinah. Shekinah. It is the glory of God. You saw the wheel, and there I've kind of highlighted the fire that's represented there. And we find this, and the reason it's there is Ezekiel says, the appearance of the living creatures was like burning coals of fire or like torches. Fire moved back and forth among the creatures. It was bright, and lightning flashed out of it. The creatures sped back and forth like flashes of lightning. As I looked at the living creatures, I saw a wheel on the ground beside each creature with its 4 faces. This was the appearance and structure of the wheels. They sparkled like topaz, and all 4 looked alike. Each appeared to be made like a wheel intersecting a wheel. As they moved, they would go in any one of the 4 directions the creatures faced. The wheels did not change directions as the creatures went, but the rims were high and awesome, and all 4 rims were full of eyes all around. When the living creatures moved, the wheels beside them moved. And when the living creatures rose from the ground, the wheels also rose. Wherever the Spirit would go, they would go, and the wheels would rise along with them, because the Spirit of the living creatures was in the wheels. When the creatures moved, they also moved. When the creatures stood still, they stood still. And when the creatures rose from the ground, the wheels rose along with them, because the Spirit of the living creatures was in the wheels. When they first used this term and said this is the glory of God, which is called the Shekinah in Hebrew, my mind went immediately to 2003 when we invaded Iraq and we said we were going to do shock and awe. And the Hebrew name for this is Shekinah. So that's where my mind went when they said that. But this is what it looks like today. You can see there's that covered area, which is over the synagogue that has the white top on it. It's a little bit more advanced now. It's a much stronger facility. They're still building the inn and the place that you could stay and visit there. But I wanted to show you this picture because I wanted to get you a realization. See this bus right here? That bus is parked in the parking lot, but right behind it you see a little ridge. That ridge is the original dirt level of that area. So imagine the height of a bus. That's how much excavation dirt was done from that area across there. All that dirt was removed.
I'm sitting here wondering they couldn't have used like big machinery.
Oh, they do.
They
They
do?
do. In certain areas they do. And they'll shovel it up and they put it in these big white bags. And then those white bags are sent to the sifting area and they sift them. Each one of those bags is marked with a specific location, what time they found it, what area it was in, and it's all mapped out, and they take it and actually sift. Every bit of that dirt from there across has all been sifted.
But like that hasn't been reconstructed though, right? That's how it was as far as the original
Well, they didn't tear it up, but they would have just scoops of dirt, like, because they would dig. From what I understand, they dig down. They'll dig a little 1 foot or 2 foot by 2 foot area down. Okay, they don't find any solid material. It's all silt type stuff, and so they'll take a scoop or like a small front end loader, and they'll scoop up a little bit of the dirt, and then they'll just put that in a bag, and then they'll go sift it. But even that took a tremendous amount of time. And then when they hit something, boom, it all stops. And then everything is hand dug from that time. And so that's what I want to show you next. That next line, that next white line that you see there, that is the area where you start to see the actual ruins. Well, that drops another 5-6 feet or so. So all of that has been excavated. And so it takes a tremendous amount of time to do this. And so this has been done all over a 10-year period.
Where do they put the stuff they dig out, the extra dirt and stuff?
They just, whenever they get through with the sifting center, and they don't find any, just the dirt and stuff, they carry it somewhere. I don't know where it goes. They may go to an excavation site. They may use it for, I would think they would probably use that soil in the fields because it would be so rich as a food for agriculture growing and things like that. So, but I don't know exactly what they do with the dirt, but they do. They just put the dirt aside. They wash it on these big buckets. It goes in these huge buckets, and they carry the dirt after it's been sifted and goes somewhere. I don't know where exactly, but I wanted to give you that idea of how much effort that it takes to uncover all of this. And you can see now why only probably about 10% of what this city would have been is actually uncovered. Now I want to take you back to Mary Magdalene for just a moment. When Mary saw Jesus on that cross, I've changed a couple of words of Psalms 38 that David wrote, very prophetic psalms about Christ. Father, do not rebuke them in your anger, or disciple them in your wrath, or discipline them in your wrath. Your arrows have pierced me, and your hand has come down on me. Because of your wrath, there is no health in my body. There is no soundness in my bones because of their sin. Their guilt has overwhelmed me like a burden too heavy to bear. My wounds fester and are loathsome because of their sinful folly. I am bowed down and brought very low. All day long I go about mourning. My back is filled with searing pain. There is no health in my body. I am feeble and utterly crushed. I groan in anguish of heart. All my longings lie open before you, Father. My sighing is not hidden from you. My heart pounds. My strength fails me. Even the light has gone from my eyes. My friends and companions avoid me because of my wounds. My neighbors stay far away. Those who want to kill me set their traps. Those who would harm me talk of my ruin. All day long they scheme and lie. I am like the deaf who cannot hear, like the mute who cannot speak. I have become like one who does not hear, whose mouth can offer no reply. Father, I wait for you. You will answer, Father my God. For I said, do not let them gloat or exalt themselves over me when my feet slip, for I am about to fall, and my pain is ever with me. I confess their iniquity. I am troubled by their sin. Many have become my enemies without cause. Those who hate me without reason are numerous. Those who repay my good with evil lodge accusations against me, though I seek only to do what is good. Father, do not forsake them. Do not be far from them, my God. Come quickly to help them. Sincerely, their Redeemer and their Savior. Mary saw his death, and she saw his body after the resurrection, and she witnessed the fulfilling of the law that we no longer have to be under. And all we have to do is believe that he went through this, and Magdalene is more proof that Jesus Christ died on the cross for each one of us. And all we have to do is believe. Thank you.